back when the third season of Twin Peaks began airing on Showtime, a lot of fans of David Lynch in this series and movies in general started to wonder whether or not we could continue classifying Twin Peaks as a television series, or if it had become something else, a larger, more ambitious film project that was just being released in digestible chunks. The argument of what is a movie and what is a television show rears its head every time a new long-form project comes out. But the real question is, does it matter? What constitutes a movie? What constitutes a television series? What constitutes a miniseries? Are the rules different? Are they changing? Do they matter at all anymore? Well, that's what we're going to find out this week.
What's the problem?
I'm not gonna kill a guy over $8,000.
He knew what he was getting into.
Well, I'm done.
I understand. This isn't for everybody.
Welcome back to the channel this week, everybody. My name's Dom. We're going to talk about content today. We're going to talk about movies and television and everything in between, and whether or not the dividing lines between the various forms of media actually matter anymore. This is not our main video this week. On Friday, I will be releasing a review of a new movie. But I just wanted to talk about this subject today because I've been watching so many different things in the last year or two, and I've gotten into this debate with people a few different times. The thing I found in general is that when it comes to this debate, there are people that do not give living shit at all about whether or not something is a movie or a show or whatever. They don't care about the distinctions. And then the people that do care about the distinctions care about them so passionately that they're a little bit creepy, and it makes me worry about them on a deeper level. I'm somewhere in between. I do think there are distinctions between different kinds of media still, as much as things have changed, and I think those distinctions are ever shifting, and that's just kind of part of it. But I don't care so much that I'll call a stranger names if they disagree with me. That's generally my barometer for whether or not I'm passionate about something. Will this draw me to call strangers names? No, I'm good. Before we get into anything harder and deeper, the first thing we're going to talk about actually is the project that made me think about this in the first place. We're going to start off by talking about Nick Winding Refn's Too Old to Die Young. Technically a new television series put out and funded by Amazon Prime's streaming service. So, Too Old to Die Young is technically a 13-episode crime show about LA and drug dealers and cops and stuff like that. It's co-written by comic book mastermind Ed Brubaker, who's written some of the best crime comics of the last 15, 20 years. He also is responsible for the Winter Soldier storyline that everyone loves in the MCU so much. Very talented guy. Worked on Westworld and television stuff too. And when this was first announced, I was super hyped for this show. I like Refn's movies, even the ones that are kind of challenging. I'm a huge Brubaker fan. I've been reading his comics for ever, even going back to when he was drawing his own graphic novels about being a 20-something shithead. I'm a huge fan of the guy. Love his work. So I'm going into this thinking, okay, cool, we're gonna have a cool crime series written like an Ed Brubaker comic, but shot like a Nick Refn show. That should be my favorite show ever. It's got a crazy cast and stuff. It's huge. I was very excited, and I figure Amazon Prime will let you do whatever you want, so it's probably gonna be really raw and stuff. I wasn't thinking about the fact that Amazon Prime was letting Nick Winding Refn do whatever he wanted, and that I probably wouldn't be getting the show that I was expecting. In fact, when Refn debuted part of the show at Cannes Film Festival this year, he referred to the show as a movie, that it was just a big movie. Just a big old 13-hour movie. Now, the thing about Too Old to Die Young is that it does feel like a movie. Kind of, because the production quality, the attention to detail, just the look, the ambiance and all that stuff, the aesthetic, very cinematic, right? In fact, it feels like fucking 30 movies, because that's how long it is, and that's how much time is spent on every little piece of the story. Ostensibly, it follows Miles Teller as a cop who's crooked, and his partner gets killed, and then he becomes a detective, and then he ends up investigating a murder of a pedophile. And then that brings him into contact with this character played by John Hawkes, who's amazing. And John Hawkes is basically this rogue avenging angel who just goes around murdering evil people. And he sort of brings Miles Teller's character into that world with him. But then it's also sort of about this drug family, and the mother, the head of this cartel, is killed, related to the death of his partner. and it's about the son of the mother who ends up taking over the entire enterprise, and his wife, and like all this other stuff. It just goes all over the place, and in kind of a good way. Like, it's sprawling and epic in a way that I'm personally attuned to. Too Old to Die Young has, like, there's just so many crazy things. It's got Hideo Kojima showing up to cut a guy's finger off. It's got William Baldwin, the best Baldwin, as one of, like, the weirdest, saddest rich dads I've ever seen in anything. Hart Bochner from Die Hard shows up as a police lieutenant who's just, like, bonkers, one of the most insane performances of the year. James Urbaniak, the Venture Brothers fame, shows up as, like, one of the creepiest, most, like, disgusting pornographers ever committed to celluloid or pixels. I think they shot this digitally. Regardless, there's so much nuttiness in the series, but in a 10-episode series, nearly every episode is an hour and a half. That's like the length of a movie per episode, and not in a way where it's like chock full of story and plot and character development, which is something that I think most people tend to expect from television, is that because of the expanded length, you can do more things with story and character that you can never fit into a movie because there's not enough time. Refn went the opposite direction with that, and there's character and there's story and stuff, but it's in there, but it's much more about just images and mood and tone, and it's really more about capturing things that you can't put into like character and story. It's about capturing like moods and feelings and emotions and like, you know, opinions and themes that are just, you know, they're purely visual and something you just kind of like absorb. Specifically, Ed Brubaker set out to write a cool like crime show, obviously, and then Nick Refn, during the course of producing the show, moved his entire family to Los Angeles and like lived in America for the first time, and it was during the election that we had a couple years ago. So I think what started out as being like, oh cool, I'll make a crime show for Amazon Prime, turned into Nick Refn just trying to express how much he fucking hates this country and all the gross people in it. It's basically a 13-hour art film that's an adaptation of that one scene in The Matrix where Agent Smith is like grabbing Morpheus and talking about how much he hates the way humans smell. Like, it's that, except Nick Refn is Agent Smith and humans are Americans, and there's no Keanu. It is a fascinating show, and the main thing that got me about it isn't necessarily the content of the show. This isn't like a review of the show, because I still haven't finished it because it's really long and I've tried very hard. In interviews, Nick Refn said, it's like a movie. It's whatever you want it to be. It doesn't matter. And one of the things that really got me specifically was he was talking about how, in the world of streaming, people continue to make television shows that do not get released week to week. They get dropped all at one chunk that you can binge in a 13-hour chunk if you wanted to. Not that you feasibly could with Too Old to Die Young, but you could. But most of the people that produce these series are still producing them like they're regular weekly network television. I mean, you can like curse more, and your budgets are kind of different, and like you have a higher likelihood of getting like bigger movie stars who are willing to try something different than you would in the eras of television when certain actors would never do TV because it was like a step down. But they're still writing the shows like they're TV shows. If you watch several episodes in a row, this is incredibly true of all of Marvel's MCU TV series. When you watch them in binging format, which most people tend to do, in which they're clearly supposed to be like, you know, consumed that way, you'll watch an episode and the episode will open up with an explanation for the previous episode as if you didn't just watch it. Because if this is a television series, you would have watched them 1 week apart, and you would have done tons of things in your life in that 1 week, and you would have like gone places and watched other things and read books and whatever, and you need a reminder of where you left off in the story. That's just normal television storytelling. But if you're making something that the majority of people who are watching are going to just watch in one big fucking smorgasbord, that's like a waste of time, right? In theory, if that's the way you're making this new product, you should be able to write and tell your story in brand new ways. Now, I think the ways Nick Refn chose to tell his story are weird, and most people aren't going to get into it, but I liked it, for the most part, just because of how audacious it was. Just the idea that, like, yeah, you don't need to do things the way we used to do things. We no longer consume pop culture in the same way that we used to. So we should start seeing more of the people who make these things in the first place adapting to that, and even presaging that, and in some cases maybe deciding, I'm going to do this now, and hopefully people will follow me on this journey. Unfortunately, not a lot of people are going to follow Nick Refn on this journey because his show is like super strange and difficult and opaque to, I think, a lot of mainstream viewers. But I think he's on to something. This reminded me of a bit of a Facebook comment debate I had a couple of years ago with Aubrey Sitterson. Really cool guy, great writer, good friend. You may know him as the former host of Straight Shoot, the YouTube series about pro wrestling, or as the upcoming writer of No One Left to Fight, a really cool new critical comic coming out from Dark Horse. But Aubrey posed the question to me, what is the difference between a movie and a TV show once? And I was like, oh, well, like a movie is this, and a TV show is this, and I explained. He was like, okay, yeah, but like why? Like, it's like, what does it matter? Like, people just watch this stuff, who cares? But like, he had a really good point. In my mind, to me, a movie is something between, like, like 75 minutes and like 3 hours or whatever, and it's a self-contained story, and it has certain mechanics and moves certain ways because that's the allotted time you have to tell your story, and that's kind of that, right? And then, like, a TV series is anything that's produced episodically to be serialized. Anything that is produced to be something that you watch in pieces, in episodes, over the course of time, to me, that's TV. Even if it doesn't happen on TV, even if you watch it on your phone, or like a laptop or whatever, it's the same thing. It's just serialized content versus like solo content. That's kind of how I look at it, right? But the industry has changed a lot, and so many shows tend to be more self-contained, and they're episodic, and they're big chunks, but like they're like their own little thing, versus movies nowadays. So many movies are parts of franchises, or remakes, or reboots, and it requires you to watch and consume other things other than this central unit of movies. Most famously, obviously, we're also talking about the MCU is like this. It's 22 movies, which is actually the number of episodes in a standard television series. This used to be, and each one functions on its own, kind of. You could watch it and you're good, but like it's definitely better if you've seen the other ones, because after a certain point in that series, they stop even explaining things to newbies because they know you've already seen the other ones. And I realized that what I think of as being a movie, like a movie, and this isn't like a movies versus film, popcorn entertainment versus art bullshit. We're not talking about that. This is just more not that. To me, a movie is something that's like, this exists in its own thing. It's its own boom. One of the things that came up in Aubrey and I's conversation about movies versus television was about the way all people, well, most like kind of pretentious people, call all comics graphic novels, right? The argument is that, like, a lot of people got into comics when, like, libraries started carrying GNs and stuff, and, like, they start calling, like, manga graphic novels, American comics graphic novels, like, anything in, like, a big, thick stack of comics is a graphic novel, right? And, like, that's not really true. Like, a graphic novel, like, originally refers to, like, a large format comic book that is designed to be one giant tome, like Will Eisner's A Contract with God, like the original graphic novel, the original OGN. And what most people call graphic novels are actually just like collections of serialized weekly comics, right? Like trade paperbacks. So, like, a comic will come out once a month or bi-weekly, depending on the schedule. And then when that story arc, 4 to 6 issues or longer, whatever, is collected into a trade, that becomes like a collection. It's the comic equivalent of what DVD box sets of television series used to be, right? So there's a difference between a trade, which is like a collection of serialized episodes into like a bigger format for a later consumption, versus something that is like 128 pages that's designed to be a 128 page standalone story. Like, that's part of where my argument kind of comes from. Writing something that's serialized, it requires different mechanics and different dramatic beats and things than writing something that's like a closed loop. There are some writers in comics who are accused of writing for the trade, i.e. writing specifically in a way that, like, week to week or month to month, the issues might not be super exciting for the actual regular Wednesday comic goers, but for people who are waiting for the trade, they're going to have like a really good solo experience by just reading that thing all in one sitting. And that to me is the difference between what happens in television now and how it could happen, which is that people are still writing TV like they're writing for weekly consumption, when in reality most people are waiting for the trade. The best way I always thought of what's a movie or versus what is a television series is this. A movie, ideally, if it was going to be based on another medium, whether it's like comics or video games or whatever, I think a movie's ideal thing to be based on would be a short story. Because a short story typically has about enough plot to make a movie make sense. When someone writes like a novel, they tend to fill in so much detail and so much richness of the world that if you ever wanted to make it into a movie, you'd lose a lot of it. You just don't have the room for that level of texture and that level of like depth, right? So, to me, that was the biggest difference. Like, a movie is a story that's like, like Run Lola Run is a movie, right? That's like 90 minutes, boom, 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 movie, over. That's something you could never do like long form because the idea would get shitty. It's perfect. It's a perfect idea and execution for that size and shape of movie. I like stuff like that. Stuff that's like, this happens, and this happens, this happens, this happens, and it's over. You know, like, I like self-contained. I like being able to consume like a whole thing and then it's over. I'm a huge fan of that. Television should be, you know, if you want to adapt a book, you should adapt it as a television series or miniseries because you have time and episodes like chapters to expand on a world and introduce a whole slew of characters. You can take time with stuff. Stuff can happen in 2 hours of television that if it happened in 2 hours of a movie would be insulting. You would feel like cheated because you left the house, okay? You left your home to go to a place to watch something, and you spent all this money on the ticket, and you spent all this money on the fucking popcorn and the soda and everything else, and then you got in there and you want your money's worth. And that doesn't necessarily always mean spectacle. It doesn't mean you want to see a whole bunch of like spaceships exploding, but it means you want to see something blown up on the big screen. And you want to see a story that's going to fully immerse you, you know? But that's changing, right? People don't necessarily care about the theater-going experience the same way they used to, unless you're like Chris Nolan. And a lot of people watch movies at home. They watch them on their big-ass TVs. And, you know, for some people, a big-ass expensive TV isn't that much different than a huge theater screen. I mean, they're objectively different. But to people's perception, they don't really care as much, right? Especially if you have a bunch of kids. You don't want to take all those little bastards out to go see something. You can just sit at home and fucking not wear pants and watch movies. Like, let me tell you something. As a film critic, I like going to press screenings. I like seeing movies early. I like going to the theater. I like the theatrical experience, okay? I've worked in the movie theater industry for the last 10 years. I love movies in that sense. But let me tell you, man, I have no qualms about watching a movie at home with no pants on, not having to go anywhere, eating what I want. Like, that's, to me, that is also the perfect movie theater experience. So, I get it. I do. I honestly understand. But there's this weird thing that's happened now where because the industry sort of assumes that people don't go to the theaters to see anything unless it's something that they can only see in theaters. The idea that, oh, you can watch that on Netflix later. If you really want to see like the big expensive stuff because you can't replicate that at home. I mean, some people with like money can replicate it at home. As a result, a lot of movies that come out in the mainstream are big, loud, spectacle movies because theoretically your home television setup can't compete with that. It can't compete with IMAX and surround sound and 40X or whatever. I get it, I do. But that means that if you wanted something that's more compact and just a solid, well-told story, that type of stuff tends to go directly to streaming anyway. I mean, there's still independent films and art house cinemas and stuff like that, but you can watch a lot of those movies. I think of something like, you know, years ago, Noah Baumbach put out Green Book. It's like not even one of Noah Baumbach's best films. I like it. But one of the things I thought was interesting about it is that Green Book is a movie that's like very intimate and personal and one-to-one and like down to the ground kind of. And it's shot in like CinemaScope and it has like these beautiful wide frames. And it's a theatrical experience. I saw it in a theater and I liked it. I was really into it. But that's a movie that today is definitely like, Green Book comes out, it goes straight to Netflix. Noah Baumbach's last movie came out and went straight to Netflix, and I loved it. I loved that even more. I think the Myra Stories is a fantastic film, but it went straight to Netflix because it's just like a little thing, and you watch it. And it was like an hour and a half. You watch it on your laptop or your TV, and you're done. Like that's where stuff like that goes. It's interesting to me specifically because Netflix also produces movies. Like they produce television series and they produce movies. Amazon Prime produces television series and they produce movies. When Amazon Prime makes a movie, the movie comes out theatrically, and then after its theatrical run, it comes out on Amazon Prime. They did that with Nick Refn's Neon Demon. They did it with tons of other movies. Netflix, if it's like a really big movie and like a director like Scorsese or Cuarón or someone is telling them like, I want to have a theatrical release, they'll do it. But otherwise, this shit just drops on Netflix. And so many of the things that used to differentiate movie versus television wasn't just content, it was also like stature. It was also quality, you know. Netflix's movies, again, other than like Cuarón and how I assume, you know, The Irishman will look, most of their movies look and feel cheap and disposable. And a lot of them star people that we used to consider like TV actors. I've seen like 9 motherfucking romantic comedies on Netflix that all star various cast members from Riverdale. I don't know if that's just like a thing they specifically do with those kids. Like if you have any free days in your shooting schedule, you want to come shoot a rom-com in 4 days, like whatever. But that's the look. Those movies just feel like boom, boom, boom. disposable little digestible pops of whatever. You know, Netflix basically has like 6 kinds of movies. It's whatever the algorithm tells them people like, and they just make that. Like, here's a black one. Here's one for teens. Here's one for queers. Here's one with Adam Sandler in it. Here's 6 more with Adam Sandler in it. And it's weird, right? It's odd to me that what we used to always consider television to be, like a somewhat digestible, disposable product that we watched on television when we were at home after a long day at work, that's kind of what Netflix movies are. Like, no one gives a shit about them. Like, no one's gonna write any like long form prose about how much they care about murder mystery. That's not gonna happen. But television, obviously, the golden age of television, you know, has become this thing where TV is like the shit. Like, all the good shit happens in TV. People love TV, and they spend hours watching a television series. You know, if I watch a movie, even a long movie, you're spending like 2 hours with those people, with those characters, with that world, and then you move on to another world. And I dig that. I've watched like 255 movies this year, and I like trying to experience a wide breadth of things and worlds. When a friend recommends a television series to me, I have to stop and think, okay, but how many seasons is it so far? How many episodes? How long are the episodes? How long do you think it's going to run? If something's only going to run for like 2 seasons, 3 seasons, I'm like, I can probably binge that in a weekend and then move on. My big thing is I want to experience as many different kinds of stories as possible. So I want to experience something, process it, and then move on. I want to keep going. I don't want to get into a show if someone's like, it's really good, it's been on for 4 seasons. I'm like, how many, is it still popular? They have like 2 or 3 left. That's like 100 hours I got to commit. When I was younger, I had no problem doing that. I loved committing, weeks to a show, buying a DVD box set, and just going disc by disc by disc, and just, binging before binging was binging. But like, it's weird to me because that era, when I was younger, when I was like a teenager and stuff, TV shows, it was like right before the dawn of like golden age TV. Like The Sopranos was still in the air, so it wasn't like that thing where every show is trying to be The Sopranos or Breaking Bad, or God forbid, now people are going to try to ape Game of Thrones. Television used to just be something you could enjoy. Like, I like, and I sort of miss TV shows that are just like about a guy who like solves a mystery every week, and then like, whatever. Maybe he has like an internet enemy or something. Nothing that's like, things that are like trifles. I'm not crazy about the new thing we all do where every TV show is like a super long epic novel and we're all just juggling 9 novels at once during a given season. That doesn't, for me, my personal consumption, that just doesn't do it for me. I'm not crazy about it. But somewhere along the line, that became what people care about. And it's not just because, TV is more of a writer's medium and movies are more of a director's medium. It's not just because a lot of big-name actors are moving towards television because they have meatier roles and they can win awards and like show off their acting in ways they can't in the background of a sci-fi blockbuster. There's a lot of factors, a lot of different things. It's so much, right? But it is strange to me that television has become this like powerful prestige thing that people all take seriously and love and agonize over. And then for a lot of people, movies are just like whatever again. I mean, there's parts of the year where really good shit comes out, everyone cares about the awards and stuff, but I think the average person, this is speaking of when I talk to friends who like aren't in my circle of like obsessive film weirdos, like just like regular ass people in the street, like they watch stuff when it comes out, they watch the big stuff and they get excited, but most things they watch at home or they watch on demand or VOD or what have you. And and that has become the new disposable, fun, whatever, low rent. Look at Netflix again. If you look at like House of Cards, right, before all the horrible spacey stuff became to light, just as a show, as a product, right? House of Cards looks gorgeous. It has very strong production value. It's David Fincher's whole look and a bunch of other really great workman directors contributing to and aping that style. And it feels like something, right? It feels substantial. It feels prestige. It feels real. Then you throw on like any Netflix movie, just any other Netflix movie, and they all feel like pilots to TV shows no one's ever gonna fucking watch. I remember I watched like Someone Great and I thought like, this is a sweet movie, it's got a cool cast, I like the idea, it's definitely geared towards me. Like the algorithm knew that I would watch something where like a girl has a breakdown over a breakup to like a Lizzo song. Like, yeah, you guys got me. But watching it didn't feel in any way compelling. It didn't feel like something that mattered. It didn't feel like something I had to consume and pay attention to. I mean, by its very virtue, most of these movies, Netflix movies, you watch because you can like look at Twitter while they're playing and you're not going to feel bad. You're not going to feel like you're going to miss anything because the stories are just slight trifles anyway, so who cares? Whereas with these shows that people get into, like you can't put your phone down unless you're live tweeting and talking about other people, but even then you can't have spoilers. But it's a consuming thing. People get into it. Like they don't want to miss anything. And that's crazy to me. It's crazy to me because a show like Too Old to Die Young feels like such an anomaly because it is technically in the television series space, but it functions like an auteurist piece of content, right? Television is for the writers, movies are for the directors. But in television, here, reference the co-writer, but this is definitely like a director's thing. It's all visual, it's all oral. None of it is like dialogue and character and growth and arcs. Like none of that shit. It's not really about that. It's just about all this other shit. That is why I think that his approach in Too Old to Die Young is not going to catch on, because people do not come to TV for the same kind of provocation that they sometimes still look for in certain kinds of films. People come to television, even though it has more prestige now and it's something that people think of as being inherently good. I do think the key motivator is still escape, right? The common denominator in this, I mean, we all watch fiction to escape from our lives. That's not like, I didn't fucking crack the walnut there, like, oh, I invented this idea. But so much, the key through line through a lot of this is the way that we want to escape, okay? It's not that we want to escape and watch like a story that isn't our lives, and the story could be anything. There's a bunch of different kinds of stories you can jump into. It's about escaping and escaping for as long as humanly possible. When we go to the multiplex, we go and we see these big budget movies. A lot of them are part of a big story world, whether it's Star Wars or Harry Potter or Marvel or whatever, and we want to stay there. And God forbid those movies have to end and we have to leave the theater. We want to stay in that world so we can come and we can read the comics maybe, or we can look at the fan fiction, or we can check online or go on Reddit for fan theories and stuff. And then we can speculate about how the next one's going to be until the next one comes out. And we've stayed in that world. And then we go there and we visit it again. And then that's just normal. And then on the other side with television, you know, it's about length. You know how many people I've talked to? Like if someone asks me, do you want to watch a Netflix show or some show that's out, I always want to know how long it is. And when I hear something's like has half-hour episodes, there's only like 6 of them or some shit, I'm like there. Because I can watch that. I can watch the whole thing, consume it, and move on. Other people are not like that. People, when you find out there's a new show, and there's like 22 episodes a season, and every episode's an hour, oh my god, that's so great, there's already 4 seasons, I'm like, oh wow, I don't want to make an 80-hour commitment to a story. Because there's going to be ups and downs and different stuff with it. That would be fine if I was watching it week to week. Like if I got into the show and it aired, and then some weeks there were shitty episodes, and some weeks there were really good episodes, and the finale was tight, that'd be fine. Because I'd do other stuff in between. But if I'm going to actually binge it and take much of my time and watch something in order, and I got to sit through all those peaks and valleys, I don't want to do that. I'd rather just go watch a movie. But I think most people are looking for some way to spend 100 hours outside of their daily lives. Have you looked outside at people's daily lives recently? It's no fun. This country's on fire. The world is on fire. Things are terrible. The actual apocalypse is probably going to happen within our lifetime. You know, in the meantime, in between having to work every day and do all these things to keep your livelihood going, those of us who can't afford to sell our belongings and go like, you know, hiking in another country or whatever, we watch shows, we watch movies, we do whatever we can to like escape from reality. So it makes sense to me that so much of this escaping is happening with larger, longer things. People want to stay in those worlds, you know? I don't think people are sad Game of Thrones is over because like they like the show. It's just now they gotta leave Westeros. I realized that this is about escape when I thought about the outliers to this phenomenon. 2 things recently came up that, you know, again, are sort of bridge the line between movies and television, and but were still very popular. And it was the series Chernobyl on HBO, which is like 5 hours and change, 5 episodes, about the nuclear reactor meltdown thing that happened in Chernobyl in the 80s and stuff. And then you also have Ava DuVernay's new series about the Central Park 5 on Netflix, which is also like, you know, 5-6 hours like long, like a similar number of chapters. Both of these series, technically, right, the stories that they each tell could have been adapted as movies. You could make a Chernobyl movie. I'm pretty sure lots of people have, up until Craig Mazin, of all people, did this show. And Ava DuVernay definitely could have turned the Central Park 5 story into a movie. They both would have been released by their respective studios in the heart of Oscar season. They would have, you know, had big campaigns to get awards, and people would have talked about them probably and seen them, or told people they saw them, and they would have won some stuff, and that would have been it. But in order to tell those stories that way, you would have had to truncate them into the 2 to 3 hour runtime. You probably would have lost a lot of detail, a lot of texture, a lot of depth. I get it. And those things might not have been as powerful as they were. So in some ways, the idea of doing them as 5 to 6 hour, essentially double-length miniseries for what a movie would be, each of those shows is allowed to take time and give people the room they need to be able to process this stuff and actually really experience it. And they're kind of Trojan horsed in because people want to watch series. They want to watch stuff that has an episodic nature, you know? I mean, the fact that Netflix put Hateful Eight on its streaming service in this miniseries cut that Quentin Tarantino worked on is like a 3 hour movie is too much, but if you watch it in 45-minute chunks, people want to watch it more. Like, that's a psychological thing. It's real. It's happening. So I like the idea that these filmmakers made these big, important, very difficult, very challenging stories and Trojan horse them into the consumption model that most people now like. It's a way to get these people who want to just escape into whatever the fuck's happening on Grey's Anatomy or whoever into seeing some more challenging stuff, to dealing with more difficult material. And I applaud that. I think it's cool. I like Chernobyl for the most part, and I still haven't watched the Varnish series yet because like I'm black and I'm depressed enough. I'm good on that for right now. But I do think other people should watch it, and I think it's good that it exists. But that's kind of where we're at, right? With content. So much of it is designed to numb us and distract us from how unhappy we are or how miserable we are. And that's not a criticism. I'm not an episode of Black Mirror. I don't have an issue with that. I think it's necessary. I do think fiction is important. And I do think that we need unreality to protect us and salve us from real reality sometimes. I just do think it's important that we keep some measure of variety in that, and that we experience as many different kinds of stories as possible. If for no other reason that stories are how we kind of help understand one another, and how we connect to one another, and how we can get through these hard times together, I think, is forming these connections with each other. But, you know, your mileage may vary, and maybe you would rather watch another, 14 hours of whatever is on the front page of Netflix than whatever weird shit Nick Refn is doing, or having to face realities of racial justice with David Duvernay. Like, I get it, everyone has their own thing, but I do think we have to make sure we don't lose that plurality, that we don't lose having the option of all of those things, because one day we're going to blink and wake up, and the multiplex is going to be all Disney, and then streaming is just going to be all Netflix, and it's going to be all the same, like, homogenized shit, and that'll suck a lot. So yeah, those are my thoughts. I know this has been kind of rambly, and I apologize. This has just been like on my mind, like, constantly, and I think it's like a real thing that's worth talking about, like the way we consume what we consume. And if you guys have any thoughts, like if you disagree or think I sound like a pretentious asshole, that's totally acceptable. Sometimes I probably do. But that's what the comment section's for. You can go in there and tell me what you think. Tell me what you guys thought of Too Old to Die Young if you've watched it. If you guys have seen Hart Bachner's awesome ukulele solo from, I think it's like episode 5. Is it 4? I think it's episode 4. And if you've watched Chernobyl, you guys want to talk about how much of a piece of shit Dyatlov is, we could talk about that in the comments. And if you have a compelling reason for why I should watch the Central Park 5 series, then maybe I'll listen to it, but I'm probably going to put that off for like as long as humanly possible because that shit looks depressing. So as always, if you liked the video, please hit thumbs up. Let me know you liked it. If you enjoy this content, you like hearing me talk about movies and stuff, you can subscribe and hit the little bell icon to get notifications for when I drop new videos. Later in the week, I will be dropping a new review of a new movie I just saw Monday. That was pretty fun and kind of surprising. And then, next week we'll do more stuff too. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for supporting the channel, and have a great day. For the record, I didn't actually watch the third season of Twin Peaks, but I think it technically counts as television because it came out week to week. People watched in episodic chunks, and they all watched it together. That's a big thing missing from television, is the communal experience. As people move towards consumption and binging formats, not everyone's going to be binging at the same time. It's like people all taking like acid at different times, or all on different trips. But, when a show comes out week to week on a specific time slot, like Game of Thrones did, everyone watches it at the same time, and then they all have a somewhat similar shared experience, which is very different, I think, than the shared experience of being in a theater together. It's like, you guys are all at this stop of the journey at the same time, and then you're going to reconvene the next week, and then you're going to be able to have the same kind of conversations with the water cooler the next day at work. Like, I think those distinctions do matter. I think they are important.